Hello and welcome to everybody. My name's Simon. I'm the founder and host of the InfoSec Live community, and have I got an exciting show for you today. Today I am joined by one of the industry's leading recruitment experts, Musa Ayoob, who is going to take us through how to build and create a masterclass CV or resume. Before we get Musa on stage, I'd just like to cover off a couple of things. One, firstly, thanks to everyone who watches and subscribes to our channel. If you don't subscribe, please click the like and subscribe button. It would be much appreciated. And for those that already are, thank you very much. And for those that don't know about us, we're not just a YouTube channel. We are a community as well, an independent community for cybersecurity professionals. I will drop the link down below here for you to click and join later at your will. However, let's get back to the main reason for the day. Hey, Carey. Hey, Alex. Nice to see you. And let's bring on our star guest, Musa Ayoob from NQB Recruitment. Hopefully, I've got a little graphic stinger here, and then he'll be right in. Musa, how are you?
Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Welcome to the CV Bootcamp, and I'd like to say thank you all for attending, and hello to everyone. So what I'm going to do is basically what I would suggest is if you've got questions, basically either put them in the chat box, and I'll make a note of them so I can answer them either at the appropriate point, or if it's a really burning question, just write urgent next to it. And what I'll do is I will basically answer it straight away. But what would be preferable is, because I might cover off a lot of things during the presentation, it's probably better to put it in the chat box, and I'll just make a note and I'll come back to it at the appropriate point in the actual presentation. So
or being your glamorous assistant, Musa, I'm sure I can do that bit for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Right, let's get.
Actually, thinking about it, if we have the chat up on the screen, it's probably going to get in the way of the presentation. So we've got two choices. We have the chat up on the screen over the presentation, or we remove the chat for now, keep it private, and then bring it up later. What do you think?
I think bring it up later. That should be fine, because a lot of those questions might be answered anyway during the presentation. And we'll probably have at least 45 minutes to an hour at the end where people can ask the specific questions, which I can go through. So, yeah, that should be fine.
Right, let's turn that off then, and let's bring your presentation on. There we go.
So this is basically a masterclass or a boot camp into how to write a masterclass CV to get you an interview. So if we can go to the first slide, please, there, Simon. Right, so what I want to do is just run through a little bit about who I am so you understand why I know what I'm talking about. I've got more than 10 years experience in tech recruitment. I started all the way back in 2000, so I've got longevity and knowledge as well. I've placed lots of candidates, including within cybersecurity and pen testing roles, SOC roles, CISOs, you name it. I also speak to employers on a daily basis. So I really do know what they are looking for. And another thing that I've done is I've actually worked for the job board, Totaljobs, for near enough 2 years. And that's given me an extensive understanding of what in the CV gets assessed by. Essentially, everything now uses AI. AI is used in some way, shape or form to screen CVs and match them to jobs. So I understand from working from the job board how that is done. And that's why I can sit here in confidence and sort of help candidates on how to put it together. Also, I researched the best use of templates online, and I'll go through that a little bit later, but there's loads of different, they're relatively inexpensive, £5, £10, to be able to put together a really good, or use a really good template to put your CV together. So we can have the next slide, please, Simon. So what you've got to always bear in mind is what the purpose of a CV is. Literally, it's just to get you to an interview. No employer is going to make a decision based on a CV alone, and no employer is just basically going to. Essentially, it's a window. So you need to put in a certain amount of information to get you to an interview. But what they don't want is 10 pages of information, which will bore their pants off. Literally, in most cases, they'll make a decision within the first 20, 30 seconds of looking through your CV. That's why how you lay it out is so critical. So if we go to the next slide, please, Simon. Okay, so just some basic things to avoid. Use a legible font. Don't use one of these fancy fonts where they can't read the writing on there. I know maybe for digital marketers that might be okay. Someone in the creative field, it might be really good. Not in IT, tech, cybersecurity, because I'll tell you what, most people are, they'll read it. I can't read this. Goodbye, in the bin. Use a legible font, Arial, Calibri, Roman Times numeral, whatever, something that's very easy to read. Use a template which is clean and easy to understand, utilizes the full scope of the page. Now, remember, most people aren't printing CVs off, they're reading them on the screen. So you can make it a little bit wider. You're not restricted to, oh, it's got to be on A4 or it's got to be letter size paper. You're not necessarily restricted to that now. But most, and I've listed a couple there, myperfectcv.co.uk and enhancedcv.com. They're very, very cost effective, but they only really give you two choices, letterhead and A4. So most people build it around there, but you can build a bespoke one a bit bigger. The length of a CV is very, very important. In that, you don't want it really, even with lots of experience, beyond 3 or 4 pages. And I'll go into that a little bit further down in the presentation. And one thing you definitely want is your GitHub, or if you are on any hacking sites where you are benched, you want your links to that, your links to LinkedIn, all the relative social media which is related to what you do. You really do want those links in there and near the top, so they can quickly go into those and have a look at what you do. Can I have the next one, Simon, please? So, some things which are absolutely vital are is literally the first half of your front screen, and the reason why is because all the key information is going to be in here. Now, you can use a layout that I put there, or you can use a different one. But essentially, you want your name clearly at the top. Some people write resume at the top. Well, we already know it's your resume. You don't need to write something that's obvious. Put your name at the top in big letters so they know who you are. If you've got a PhD, or if you've got some sort of key qualification, you want to put that after your name, put it after your name if it enhances your application in any way. So if you've got a PhD in some form of cybersecurity, or if you've got a PhD in machine learning, put doctor, and then afterwards in brackets you can put your specialism. It's well worth doing. You want your personal information on the right hand side, along with or somewhere at the top with your social links. Again, it's vital. You've got to remember, you've got 30 seconds to make an impression with any employer or recruiter. And what they want to know is, can I click into those links? Can I see what this person does? You don't need your full address. In fact, I would recommend you don't. Just put your city, and if you're not located in the country you're applying to, then use the country. So if, like, for example, if I'm applying in the US, I'd put Manchester, UK, so they know where I'm located, because there is a Manchester in the US as well. So have that information there. Your summary, and again, this is the reason why some of those sites are really good. They will help you build a professional summary of yourself. Sometimes you don't realize you see yourself through your own eyes. Some of these sites that I mentioned previously really do help you build that profile, that professional summary. And the professional summary, your accomplishments and your key skills, these are the 3 areas that are going to get you an interview or not. People think it's all that work history you've got. It's not. It really isn't. They're going to take one look at that front page. They're going to see your summary. It's clear, concise, tells them exactly what you've done, tells them what you want to do, the accomplishments and the skills combined. All of it will really make a huge impact and difference. So with the professional summary, for example, if you're an entry-level person that's looking at going into, let's say, penetration testing, but you come from, let's say, an IT support background, you want to mention that because it's related and it shows progression. So, for example, you can use terminology like 5 years experience in support, looking to move into an entry role in cybersecurity, have experience in infrastructure and networking, and make it related to what you're looking for. And you can mention a few things in there about what you've done. So if you've done if you off your own back have gone and done a course in CompTIA Security Plus or CE8, something like that, you can mention that in there. Or if you've done some within your role in support, you've been required to put together configurations for firewalls. You've had to do things that are related to cybersecurity. Let's not say the hardcore cybersecurity skills, but it's related. Put that in your professional summary. Now, within your accomplishments, I would keep this to about 10. Don't have more than 10, and do not repeat the information further down. You don't need to. When you've got it in your accomplishments, the way in which to structure that is mention the company you were at when you achieved what you did. So in my case, was Totaljobs. I hit 150% against target in whatever year it was. Boom! They can see here, salesman, he can hit target. And for you guys, this would be things like, if you're an entry level person, you'll have done a course. So mention the courses that you've done here. There is a school of thought that says, oh, you need a section on education. Maybe not. It depends. If you're got a PhD and things, you possibly might consider it. But if you've done a whole load of courses in cybersecurity, but you don't have any experience, this is the place to put it under accomplishments. So,
Musa, do you mind if I jump in? Going back to the point about whether you should put on your education, is it different for people who are younger than us?
it depends. It very much depends. So, for example, if you've done a degree in cybersecurity, yes, and you're looking for a job in cybersecurity, yes, I would put that a separate section in education. But there's a lot of people that if you are, if you've done a degree in, I don't know, geography, but you've now decided to move into cybersecurity, there's no relevance between geography and your degree in geography and cybersecurity. So there's no added value in having it there, other than the fact that you've gone through 4 years of education, got yourself 50 grand in debt, only to now move into a different area. So think you've got to remember it's really relative. And coupled with your accomplishments, what's really, really important is your skills. Now, for people in cybersecurity, I would break that down into two. So the top skill should be your cybersecurity skills. If you are an entry-level person, you must have done courses. Now, whether that's IT skills, so if you come from a support background and you've worked on Microsoft Server, Active Directory, you've done the firewall configuration, network equipment configuration, you've built networks, put that in there. And if you also done, for example, your course, you've done a hacking course, you've got to number 200 and something out of all of them, put it in there as a skill. It's important.
Can I jump in again, Musa? I see that whole Cyberhuman initiative are in the audience. Hey, Paul, if that's you. They do some amazing work helping people kind of prep and get ready for the industry and get jobs. When you're doing volunteer work for organisations such as the whole Cyberhuman initiative and InfoSec Live, we've got some people doing some work with us. Where should that go on this CV resume?
So if it's sort of voluntary work, you can put that under your experience.
Okay.
If you've worked shadow, or if you've done any kind of work that's unpaid, even put it inside your work experience. But what you can do is under your accomplishments, you can put that there, because it shows initiative. Not every accomplishment has to be for me as a salesperson, it's usually very easy to configure what my accomplishments are. They're all financial. I increased revenue. I brought in this client. I got onto that PSL, etc., etc. For someone in cybersecurity, it might be a little bit more challenging what to put there. But something like work shadowing, gaining experience on a course, gaining experience by working for a company, within an apprenticeship, whatever it is, you can put it under accomplishments, because it needs to be visible straight away that, look, I'm not just interested in cybersecurity, but I've got a little bit of experience in it, giving you a little bit of a boost. Remember, the idea is that you don't want them having to read every single line of your CV. What you want them to do is look at your summary, your accomplishments, your skills, and then skim over the rest of it. So that basically what happens is they can see straight away, right, okay, this is an entry-level role for a pen tester. What do I need? I need somebody who's got an understanding of networks, because it's pen testing of network infrastructure rather than web apps, let's say. So it's going to give you what the employer wants to see is, right, has this person got some route into doing this? Have they got the aptitude? What have they done in the past in terms of what skills have they picked up? What accomplishments can they show me that and what is it that they want to do, and does that match? And one really important thing I forgot to mention is, every time you apply for a role, get the job spec out and amend your CV according to it. No way do you ever just send a CV without checking the job spec first. And this is the biggest mistake that every single job hunter makes, is that they just think, oh, it's a cybersecurity role, let me just fire off my CV as it is. No, because they might have specific things in the job spec that you need to then use that in your accomplishments or your skills, or to show it. So, for example, if somebody wants a infrastructure network engineer, now what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that your skills relate all back to that. So configuring networks, working with Cisco equipment, configuring routers, configuring switches, going to all of that sort of stuff it's vital. You don't just send off a CV without checking the spec first and making sure that you've tailored your CV according to that spec.
So when you're saying about tailoring it, Musa, you mentioned AI earlier being used in a lot of the processes. I suppose the tailoring part is crucial to get past that bit, is it, as well?
Absolutely. So there's two sets of screenings that happen. One, usually an ATS system or the job boards will automatically, based on the candidate CV and the job spec, automatically determine how well matched they are, one. And then two, a human being will get the CV and they'll read through, and knowing what the spec is, because it'll be either HR, the recruiter, or it'll be the end line manager looking through, and he's got to be able to identify immediately why is this CV going to be any good. And that's why you're right, AI is very important, and that's why you've got to make sure that you don't fall foul of the AI technology. And you've literally, the only way to do that is tweak the CV. You'll have a standard CV essentially with everything on there, and then what happens is you'll tailor it and add or subtract or move things around, just so that those crucial things for every application you make are visible and immediately identifiable for a employer.
Do you know what? I can't agree more with what you've said, Musa, because for those people watching, Musa actually helped me with my own CV, my resume, about a week ago now. And before that, I'd put one together for the first time in 20 years, thinking that my experience would be enough on a piece of paper to send off to people. And I haven't said this to anyone out loud, but I think I must have kind of blindly applied to about 25 jobs, I reckon, through LinkedIn, through the jobs board. How many responses do you think I got back from that?
Zero.
None. Yeah. Then Musa helped me do this basically to my resume, and I sent 3 off because obviously it takes longer if you're going to do it properly. It's quality over quantity, isn't it? So you're finding the right jobs and you're honing in and doing the research. Out of 3 applications I sent, I got 3 interviews. Out of those 3 interviews, I'm still waiting for the first one on one of them, but the other 2, the first one went really well, just waiting to hear back. And the second one, I was due to have today, and I cancelled for the simple reason I want the first job. But my point is, well, I can't see the point in wasting their time. I said to my wife last night, I know I was applying for loads of different jobs, but it's hard to find one that you really want. And
Absolutely.
I think I found one that I really want. And the only reason they looked, well, 2 reasons. One, another recruiter contact knew the guy and put me in touch, but it was my CV that you put together that got me in the door. And I can't say how important it is enough that you need to do this for each application, because I wasted a week and probably missed out on a couple of jobs that, if I'm honest, I think I could have done in my sleep. But from them looking at my CV, they obviously didn't think that I could even do it awake. So
Absolutely, Simon. And that's the critical bit of information, tailoring it to each employer and each job spec. And the reason why this is so important is because you could be applying, you might have generalist cybersecurity skills, and it might be that the first job you go for is a junior pen tester, but for web apps. Okay, now that's a difference. Essentially, it's similar skills, but different to somebody who's going to do network infrastructure pen testing. It's, again, you're working with different bits of equipment. You're looking at different sort of skills. So you need to mold it, because otherwise the employer's going to go and look, hang on a minute, this guy just doing web app testing.
Well, let's clarify this then, Musa. So, what bits on here should you be tailoring each time? Because for someone who hasn't done this before, it can seem like a thankless task having to go through the whole document. But you said to me that it wasn't the whole document that needed going through,
No,
was it?
absolutely. Maybe in the professional summary, most of it will stay the same. However, if you're looking for example, one role you're applying for is web app testing, then you need to say in there, I am looking for a junior entry or whatever it is, a role within cybersecurity within web app testing. So one of the lines should mention it so that it pops up immediately on their radar. The accomplishments will generally be the same. What you need to do is have 2 or 3 which relate back to the job spec. So if you've got 10 accomplishments, you're going to keep 7 of them the same, because essentially there's a lot of crossover within cybersecurity. It's not that everything's different. Even web app testing and pen testing of the infrastructure is quite similar. So a lot of the tools you're going to use are the same. However, there will be certain tweaks that you can make to 3 of your accomplishments to tailor it that way. So I'm not talking about tweaking everything. What I'm saying is you need to just make that the connection for them, so that, right, professional summary, I can see a line in there which really does stand out, and it tells me this person's looking for exactly this type of job. In the accomplishments, I can see 2 or 3 things there that really are bang on related to what they've applied for. And in the skills, in the cybersecurity skills that you put, so you'll have 10 overall skills for cybersecurity that you're going to put down. Of those 10, at least make 3 or 4 of them related back to the job spec. It's a must, because if you don't do that, the first thing that the person's he's going to be scratching their head saying, hang on a minute, why has this candidate applied for this role? What is it in there? Your work history can say the same, because you're not going to put war and peace in there. You're going to give very short and bullet points as to what you've done. This is the crux of your CV is always going to be this first page.
Let me just flip this off for a sec, right, and bring us back up on on the stage, because I've got 2 questions. One from Alex earlier. I noticed that Alex has got an interview in about 37 minutes.
Okay.
So I just want to get you to answer his question quickly, Musa. You see that one?
So should I use an error I found in my interviews blog post as a talking point? Well, Alex, you might. It depends. You don't really know this person, and they might get the hump. They might not like you pointing out an error. However, there's an indirect way maybe you can bring it in. So if you know what they're talking about in the blog post, you might want to give your own slant on it, and they get the idea you've read it at the very least. Don't need to directly say, you know what, you big wally, you've written this in your post.
Yeah, don't do that.
I would suggest, because you don't know the person, you don't know how they'll react. I would not in any way, shape or form turn around and tell them, you made a mistake. What you can do is say, I read your blog post about such and such and such as a, and what you might want to do is say, right, my thoughts on what you've written, or you might give your thoughts on what they've written. However, what you might want to do is just say, I've read your blog post on this, and wait for them to respond and say something before you say anything. Because it might be that they'll tell you themselves that they've made an error, and it might be a talking point.
So be careful.
Yeah, just be careful. Don't necessarily. But I mean, for me, I wouldn't care. I'd say, "Oh, right, did I? Bloody hell, let me unchange that."
I wouldn't be surprised if it was me, Alex, but other people might get the hump. Another couple of quick ones before we go back.
Yeah,
Thanks,
sure.
Alex. Mohammed, I just want to show yours, because I'm with you. I'm with you there, my friend. Mine sucked too. So I don't think you're the only one. And the last one is from Paul Cummings, that whole Cyberhuman initiative over the pond in the US. Need to understand a CV is different than a resume. Can you clarify that for us, Musa?
So I've never found a good answer to this, to be honest. Well, a lot of people have inferred that a resume is sort of a much more overall is a much more comprehensive document that is for people at a much senior level. This is what I was told when I first went into recruitment. And a CV is just literally curriculum vitae, which is a, let's just say, somebody who's not as experienced presenting their work history and their previous employment history and stuff. But to be honest, in reality,
is it different in the States than it is here,
I
perhaps?
think
I mean,
it's
I quite like the fact, Paul, that I'm going to keep calling mine a resume based on that description, I think. But I'll bring the
I
presentation
think
back up.
absolutely, but I think Simon, to be honest, it's a moot point, and
Yeah.
and really things have merged over the last, say, 5-10 years. When I first started, I mean, resume, you only really hear American companies mention it. To be honest, I've
Yeah.
never in and I've done senior recruitment. I've placed people at over 100 grand, and they've never asked for a resume. They always ask for a. In actual fact, the correct terminology is profile. As a recruiter, I don't send just a CV. I send a profile. And
Well, let's stick on that then, because for people who don't know how the process works, we just assume that we send in this piece of paper, you look at it, and then pass it on to Jeff, the CEO. But that's not the case, no.
no, what happens is I will first of all put your CV into a format that is I know is going to get you an interview, but I also write a little bit of a narrative with your key skills myself in a table, and I present that to my clients. If I get a chance at the end of the presentation, I will show you an example of that. I'll remove actually, it's okay because nobody, all our CVs go out anonymously anyway, so it won't compromise GDPR at all. I'll pull one out and I'll show you how they're submitted. Let's just get back to the presentation a bit here. So on the accomplishment side, we've done that. On the skills, what you've got to do is you've got to break them down into two types of skills. One is your technical skills. Now that will be, and a lot of techie people, they tend to use the one with bars going across. So they'll mention the skill, and underneath there'll be like a line which sort of shows what their level of competence. That's fine. You can use that or not. It doesn't really matter because generally speaking, they'll understand if you're an entry level person that you're not an expert in it. If you are an experienced person, then it works. Having that line underneath showing that you've got, it's like 5 bar, it's like the full length of the bar or 3/4 or half. It just gives them a much better idea of your competency if you're an experienced person. But what it will do is it'll take up space. So just be careful of how you do it. And also remember, make those skills related to a job. Talking to a few. Oh, I missed that one. Talking about they look for resumes folks already in the industry as a kind of.
Yeah, I was just bringing it up while you were talking. Sorry, and then realised that it covered up both our faces, which probably isn't a bad thing anyway. But I just think it's good because I know we've got a few people in the States watching as we have in the UK, and it's good to get kind of clarity on what the situation is over there as much as it is for here.
I'll talk through that afterwards about the chronology and everything afterwards. And then the first set of skills will be things like Splunk. If you're an infrastructure, if you've done infrastructure engineering before, if you've been testing web. See, some people, what happens is they were software developers. They then moved from software. They did some testing of the code. They then transformed into cybersecurity. You can show, but even in your skills, you can show progression of your skills. So it's not a bad thing, if you have got Java, or if you've got other technical skills, you can put them in there. Remember, try and keep it to 10. You don't really want more than 10 technical skills and tools in there. It just gets a bit much if you do more. And also, one other thing, for example, if you're, let's just say, a web developer, but you're also a front-end developer, you're a back-end developer, what you can do is some of the skills go together. So like things like JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, they're literally what somebody would have anyway. Put them on one line. You don't necessarily need to put them on 3 separate things because you're taking up space. It's another way of using the space by putting all 3 on one line. So it might be the same thing, that there might be certain skills, like, for example, routers, switches, and hubs. You might think, okay, do I really need a separate line for configuring routers, switches, and hubs? And if you don't, then don't use 3 separate entries for it. Do it on one line. It's that way it saves space for you to put other skills, so you can fill it out with as many as you can, but try and keep it to 10 bullet points. And that's another thing. Use bullet points. It's clean, it's easy to read, and it makes it means that you don't have to write full sentences, which is probably a good thing, because otherwise you get stuck in grammatical issues, and again, not, some people have got very good written English. Others, let's just say that it's questionable. It takes.
Let's keep this interactive for now and bring up this one. Alazar, I think we might have covered this off a few minutes ago, but you might have just jumped in. It says, can we put our learning as experience? For example, if we prepared for some kind of cert? I think the answer is absolutely 100%.
Yes, you can. There's two ways to do it. You can either put it in your accomplishments, or straight after accomplishments, you can have a section on accreditations and courses. So again, it'll still be on the front page, still right at the front. Some people, what they do is they don't bother with the soft skills. So where I've got skills and business skills, and technical people will have cybersecurity skills, and then underneath they might have their soft skills. You can remove that if you want, and you can put your certifications there underneath. And that way it's bang, boom, straight there. If you've got lots of accomplishments and you think, you know what, I'm going to struggle here to fit everything in, have a separate section for accreditation. It could be that you've done 10 different accreditations over the last 5 years. You've got CEF, CompTIA, Network Plus. You've got, you've done the Crest. You've done this. You've done that. Then what you want is a separate thing, a separate section. However, remember, if you've done something like Crest, which is quite a prestigious, even though we've had this discussion before, I think it's a pile of poo, all of this.
Technical term, that.
No, I mean, in the sense that there's no substitute to experience. Courses are good, but really what you want is on-the-job experience. However, if you've got something prestigious that you've done some really, really shit hot qualification, put it in your professional summary. Crest accredited cybersecurity engineer, Crest accredited, or whatever the thing is. So if you know that's going to be, it's going to prick up their ears and it's going to add 10 grand to your salary request.
I think the thing is, I think as an industry or as practicing professionals, we know that it doesn't perhaps mean as much as the companies who take the people on, and it's a massive issue when looking for penetration testing work on the freelancer sites. When I was doing that a few months ago, I would say 50% of the UK-based jobs are asking for that kind of accreditation. So whether rightly or wrongly, whether this is the right thing or not, it is kind of a must when it comes to some of them.
I agree, and all the recruiters that I have recruited cybersecurity for, the first thing they say, for pen tests especially, do they have Crest accreditation? It's like, come on, man. They need, I mean, literally, I had somebody who had like 8 years of pen testing experience, and they wouldn't consider him because he didn't have Crest accreditation. And I'm like, you're balmy, you're mad. This man has got more practical experience than your entire team, and you won't consider him because he's not got Crest.
You can lead a horse to water, Musa, but you can't
agree.
make it drink.
But, so, unfortunately, though, that's the way it is. So if you've got certain accreditations and they're really prestigious, put them in your professional summary. If they're run of the mill and you've got lots of them, and you think, you know what, I'm going to fill out my accomplishments this way, but I've got some really good accomplishments that I want to keep separate. Make a separate section under certifications, underneath your accomplishments. And that way you can basically, you're opening up yourself to say, I've got all of this as well. So it's an added advantage. It's very much how you want to. I mean, at the end of the day, a person will know. If you get really stuck and you're not really sure, I'll leave my contact information. It's on LinkedIn anyway. Link in with me. Send me your CV. Tell me what you're applying for. We'll have a chat, and I will give you I'll give you a hand on how to present it together. That's no problem for me. I'm more than happy to do that. If we can have the, is there any specific questions for people on the first page or the front screen? Is there anyone who wants to know anything further specific here?
Well, I've got some pinned ones from earlier,
Okay.
but I think they can wait. I think they can wait until the end.
No problem. If we go to the next page, then Simon.
Only if you call me your glamorous assistant.
My glamorous assistant, Simon. Simon says.
There we go. Oh, is it right? Have I done it right?
Yeah, you have indeed. Right. So, with regards to your work history, you need to make sure it's in chronological order with your most recent first. Now, the other day I had a candidate, and I think he's in here today as well, where he's got non-related work experience. It does not matter, because I'll tell you something. There's certain things that employers look for. Is how did you keep busy while you were doing your courses? How reliable are you? Did you have progression? Even if it's unrelated, it does not
Do you know
matter.
what, Musa? If it's the same person I'm thinking about, and we won't mention any names, this person also overachieved at every job that he did before. So one of the jobs he went from starting on the bottom and then worked up to a manager really quickly. Another one, there was another great example of progression, but neither of those things were on that resume or that CV at the time. Would you say that that's a common fault for people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What happens is that when you switch industries,
It's
you
hard to
sort
blow
of
smoke up your own arse, though, isn't it? I think would be my comment. That's what I mean, you'd be surprised, but I did find that quite difficult.
no, you're right. But if you can't sell yourself in an interview, how are you going to get a job? That
Yeah.
you've got to really think now. Unfortunately, it's one of these, especially at the entry level. You've got loads of people, and some of them are completely irrelevant. If you think of it like this, an employer, when they put out an advert, they might get 150 CVs, of which 120 are completely irrelevant. They're like somebody who's got no interest other than they basically either want in the UK, because some of you aren't from here, we've got a system of how people claim unemployment benefit. And one of the things is they've got to apply for a certain number of jobs. So all they do is they go online on the job board and they click, 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 apply, apply, apply. And literally it frustrates employers, because you look at a CV and you think, why has this guy applied for this job? And they'll
Well,
wait.
the worst thing is probably the 25 firms that I applied to with my first CV thought that. Let me just bring this up. I know we keep jumping about, but I want to keep it interactive while we've got people. Oh no, that's the wrong one. While we've got people making comments, it's Darren
Please do.
Doyle from LinkedIn, and I think this is pretty relevant and well worth a discussion point.
Okay, so I'm not sure how to ask questions properly, but I'm curious your thoughts on whether job recruitment posts are often imposter syndrome other type.
I mean, Darren, from my point of view, the only research that I've looked at myself is about the differences between how men and women approach CVs. But I think, without wanting to make it a gender debate, I think that's the only research we've got. But we can liken that to lots of different things. So some people who are sort of naturally confident in themselves would see a job advert where they'd only match 30-40% of those skills and apply for it anyway. However, other people who I'm not saying they're not confident, but perhaps you're not convinced that you could do it, or you're worried that you'd make a mistake. Maybe more caring people, dare I say, are less likely to put in those applications. However, they're just as likely to get the job. I think that's what I've learned, and getting over that kind of, not the imposter syndrome, but the barriers that are being put up in these job specs is half the battle, isn't it, Musa?
What I would suggest is, one thing I would say is that you've got to remember that nobody will ever be 100% match to any job spec. It's impossible. It doesn't happen. What usually happens is that you've got cross transferable skills that you can bring from other employment that you've done that can match up to that. So sometimes what you've got to do is you've got to look at your own experience and really think to yourself, hang on a minute, they're asking about, different things, and you might have experience that you can also relate back to it. And at some point, I will also do a session on how to approach an interview and how to prepare yourself for an interview. But
Yeah, so,
essentially,
sorry, Alex, we didn't do that one today because I know you've got one in 20 minutes. But
absolutely. But one thing you need to do is you need to be confident. You're trying to sell yourself for a role. You're competing against I'd say if you strip out 80% of the CVs, which are completely irrelevant, there is still 20%. So let's say there's 20 CVs there that are relevant. You're going to compete against them. So you do need to blow your own trumpet. You need to look at what relates back. And this is where I say, again, it's vital that you go through the job spec and you relate back your experience and you show that on the front page of your CV. Leave them in no doubt. They don't even need to read page 2, 3, and 4. They read page 1 and they see, yeah, that relates, that relates, that relates, that relates.
let's what about this one from Roy? Because I've experienced problems with having gaps in mine in the past, but that was different. I was in regulated financial services, and the FCA want to know where you were every day for the last however many years. And I unfortunately spent a few years in Tenerife. And when they ask you to get references from situations like that, it becomes quite difficult.
Yeah.
But what would you say to his comment about only the related work experience? And I suppose it goes back to
No,
the length of the document as well, doesn't it?
look, I'll tell you something. You don't need to be more than 4 pages on a CV, even if you've got 25. I don't think I've got an example here for myself. Oh, actually, I have. So what I've done is on the bottom of my CV. I don't know if you can read that. Is it backwards? You can see
No,
basically.
it's good. Yeah, I can see
Yeah,
it.
I what I've done is I've stripped it right down and basically mentioned very little on those jobs. And the same with gaps in your employment. If you were caring for a relative that was ill, if you were looking for a job in between jobs, did you do a course? Did you do something? It's all right to have gaps as long as you can explain them. This whole concept that we're somehow robots and you need to work from this month, and then before you start, your employment concurrently runs on. As soon as you stop one, you start. It doesn't work like that. We're human beings. You could have a sick family member. You might need to spend 3 or 4 months or even a year out of work because you're having to do something else. You're doing a course. As long as you can explain it away, don't worry about having gaps. There's too much emphasis placed. And you know what? For maybe some people that are completely anal and robots, it might be a problem. But I'll tell you something.
You don't want to work for them
No,
anyway, Roy.
exactly. 90% of employers are good and they don't worry about gaps because they know they're human beings themselves. They might have gaps in their employment. It becomes a problem if you can't explain what you're doing. If you were just
Is it different for like security clearance work though, Musa? It must be,
no,
mustn't
because it isn't because you'll put that in when you go from any
it?
form of
Okay.
DPS check or security clearance. They ask you for your date, and if you weren't employed, you just put that you weren't employed, and that's fine. There's no issue. Where it becomes a problem is if you can't get references from people. If you've done, usually the minimum reference someone will give you is like, worked here, this was a salary, this is when they worked here, this is the job title. Unless you've done something really bad, and I would like to think that nobody on this call on this workshop would have done that. Generally, you're okay as long as you've not stolen something or you've given straight secrets away or things like that. Otherwise, it becomes an issue. Let's go back to the next part of the CV. So your work history, it needs to be chronological with your latest work first. And like I said earlier, absolutely, even if the work is unrelated, put it in there. It's just a matter of present, because it could be that you started off as let's say, at the bottom of the rung and you were there for 4 years, but by the time you left, you were, I don't know, a manager. Well, it shows progression. It shows longevity of career. It shows that you were able to adapt, learn new things, new skills. You were promoted. Why wouldn't you put it on there? Okay, it's not related. So what? So what an employer is going to say is that this person can stay in an organization 2, 3, 4, 5 years, get promoted, can pick up new skills, can adapt to different situations, can, literally. So you've got to think like that, it might be that you've been a taxi driver or a waiter, and I'm not knocking any of these careers. I've done loads of these things myself. So don't for a minute think that I'm trying to belittle anybody that does. I've done it myself. I worked in call centers. I've done all sorts, cleaning, working at the postal service. So you put it down, you put it in your CV. Why? Because it shows that you were employed, you were busy while you were, it was a different career. You were doing something different at the time. You moved, but it shows longevity. It shows your ability to get promoted. So many different things. So put that on there, definitely. Use bullet points. You don't need to repeat things again and again and again. So, for example, if you've got something in your accomplishments, let's say, I don't know, you did the hack in a box, what do you call it, competition sort of thing, and you came 20th in that, and you've got that in your accomplishment. You don't need to mention it again. Just have it there in the top bit. So, although often what happens is salespeople are the worst for this. We really are the worst. What we do is we try and bang on thinking that it makes a big difference, that you've got it in your accomplishments. Now
I
you
did
put it in your work history. You don't need to do it. What any employer wants to
that.
see, they just want to see what you were doing. So key bullet points. what you were responsible for, what you were doing, what were the main things that you were tasked in doing. And if for example, you've got a job where you were there for 5 years, for the first year you were customer service, then you moved up to a team leader, and then you finally moved up to the team manager. You mention each of them and you break them down.
What about
In
this though? What about the flip side to that? This point that Alazar's put up again. If I join a different company recently, maybe as a developer, I reckon it is as a developer, isn't it, Alazar? And I'm still looking for entry level security jobs. Do I put that on my experience too, or would the HR see that as a red flag? That's a really good point, actually.
it very much depends, because at the end of the day, what some people do is a little bit naughty. They just put down that they're doing a contract to sort of explain it.
So
I
that's what
wouldn't.
you put it as down as a contract. Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily. What do you
You
call
could,
it?
or you could put it down and make sure you've got an answer for the question.
Yeah,
So a lot
the
of people
main
I've
thing.
spoken to who've recently joined the industry as junior pen testers have spent the first 4 weeks looking like they're going to frazzle out because they've had so much work put on them. A couple of people
Absolutely.
I know who joined SOC centres after 2 weeks are horrified by the whole experience and want to leave. So it happens, we make mistakes and we join the wrong companies sometimes, and it can be difficult to then try and frame that and not look like a job hopper.
Well, yeah, but look, you look at it a different way. What you do is when you go back into when they go back into your CV and they see, right, okay, he's got 5 years there, 3 years there, 2 years there, 3 years there. They realize you're not a job hopper. Now, where
Yeah.
it is a problem is if you are a job hopper, there's
Yeah.
no getting around that.
Well,
And
so what about someone? So like, let's look at me when I was. Let's not look at me in my teens. Let's look in my early 20s when I kind of went from different sales jobs to different sales jobs. I kind of, rightly or wrongly, when I then I moved away to the Canary Islands for a few years, came back, got a proper job, and obviously had to go through all this process. And I combined all of those roles into just one generic sales category, and did it that way. I'm not encouraging people to lie, but sometimes I did a post earlier about framing and how things can be framed. And it's all about how you frame it, I would say.
yeah, and I'd agree. Basically, for example, because you've got a 20-year work history, you can
Yeah,
get away with it.
yeah.
Because in reality, maybe the last 15 years are relevant, and maybe the previous 10 aren't really relevant.
So
Because
let's stick on that then, Musa, because I'm 47, right? I
yeah,
know there's some older people in the audience as well as younger people. How does that work then? So for those jobs when we were in our teens and in maybe our 20s that bear absolutely no relevance, do you just miss them off? What do you do?
or you put the one line there. You can either
Right.
miss them off
Okay.
altogether, and some people write a line in there. Previous work history, ask for previous work history.
KFC, yeah, or
Yeah,
whatever it might be.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest. If you end up putting every single job and filling it out properly, you're going to end up with, if you've got
War and Peace.
25 years experience, you're going to end up with about
Yeah.
9 pages of a
You
CV.
are, yeah.
Nobody wants to read that. You don't want to read it, let alone an employer. So at the end of the day, it doesn't make any sense. What you want is you want to try and restrict yourself to keeping it down to 3 pages or 4 pages max. And if that means let me show you again. So if that means you have to do this, whereby you can see that I've basically I've reduced down what I've written there and into one line, then do that. It's honestly not a big deal, because there is going to be people who've got a 25-year work history. What do you do literally? And they could have worked for, in their first 10 years, they might have worked for 10 jobs.
Yeah.
Are you going to put everyone down? No, I wouldn't either leave it off altogether and just write something like a previous work prior to 2000, ask for my
Do
work.
you know what? This opens up a whole different subject, though, because for people like me who flitted around a lot when they were younger for jobs, and other people who flitted around a lot throughout their careers, I'm not saying that it's relative to everyone, but people with ADHD struggle to stick with certain jobs. And my 22-year-old son is now in probably his third job, I would say. And it's because he's, no disrespect to him or anyone else, it's because they've gone into the wrong jobs. Because you've got to understand what you can bear doing on a daily basis. You can't put me in an office behind a computer all day because I will go crazy. It'll be too much for me. I need a job that I'm doing different things every day. And I think before you start blindly applying for all those different jobs, take a good look at who you are and what makes you happy from what you want to do for work as well. I'll stop there. I just wanted to make that point quickly.
Absolutely. And one thing I would say is that in 2022 now, if an employer isn't sensitive to medical conditions, mental health conditions, and if they're not sensitive to people's needs, you really don't want to work for them. So
No,
if you can't be open and honest with an employer to say, look, I have had mental health issues previously, or I have had physical health issues, and they're not willing to listen, then really they are.
you don't want to work there anyway.
No,
No,
you
I
don't,
completely
because
agree.
it'll be a nightmare. And if you know what, I'll be honest. The previously it used to be people work 3, 4, 5, 10 years in companies. It's shrunk.
Has
Now
it?
an average tenure is about 18 months in a company.
Is it really?
Yeah, you know what?
Is that industry specific though? Because it's quite a high turnover rate, I suppose, here, isn't it?
There is, but what's also happened is because of COVID, candidates are more afraid to leave now. So what you might find is that they are now lengthening out. But it's literally about 18 months, 2 years. Whereas before, when you look at some people who are slightly in their 40s and 50s and 60s, their CVs show literally 10 years one company, 8 years one company, 4 years one. They show much more longevity because it's an accepted norm now that people won't sit around in a job they hate. They will move. Because there's nothing more important than your mental health. And you know what? You can explain that. You can explain, look, you know what? I started this job. It was fine. Everything was great. Then suddenly everything changed. New management, the role changed, but they didn't pay me any different. They didn't give, they piled on extra responsibilities. And what do you call it? Yeah, a little too open and honest. Okay. One of the things that you need to do is you need to be able to term it and yes, it does filter out crappy environments. I agree with that, but you need to frame it in such a way that doesn't get anybody's back up. So without actually going in and saying that company was a bunch of fuckwits, pardon my language, right? Or that company was really, really shit. The managing director was an absolute
diplomatic. Is that what you're saying?
You need to be diplomatic. You got to think, right? I can't directly call someone an absolute.
It's no different to if you're a salesperson. The worst thing, in my opinion, that you can do is slag off someone else's product.
Absolutely.
And it's no different if you're going to join a firm. The last thing they're going to want is someone joining them who they're going to think, one, whinges a lot, and two, as soon as they walk out the door from their day at work, are going to slag them off, perhaps.
What you probably want to do is, and you want to filter out poor environments, is to ask questions. Find out how flexible they are. Find out how they deal with different situations. So pose them questions that will read that information. You don't need, you know what? In cards, when you play certain card games, you don't want anyone to read what you're going to do you?
No.
Same way, you keep your cards close to your chest, but you ask questions that will give you the information you need without them learning. And if anyone wants a little bit of experience in that, come catch up with me. Get my information. If you've got interviews coming up, I can give you a massive number of pointers on how you can do it. If you want to know about, for example, if you want to know about, have they got a flexible thing? And also, there's loads of websites now that actually give you feedback on employers. Glassdoor is a massive one. You know, the other day I was looking through. There was a company I was trying to get into, and I thought, let me just go and check them on Glassdoor. When I read the comments on Glassdoor, I thought, I don't want to recruit for them.
Do you know what? It's funny you should say that. I spoke to the CEO of a fairly big organisation a few weeks ago, and without meeting him, I went through Glassdoor, and the reviews were horrendous, and there were like 10 pretty bad reviews. And I thought, do you know what? Disgruntled employees tend to put things on things like that more than good experiences, because people like to complain more than they do compliment. And the ironic thing was, the guy was an absolute arrogant twat. And if you're watching, you know who you are, because you actually called me a pirate on the call, which I thought was quite offensive. But apparently it's tough love, and it's the way that he deals with people. Well, I just thought he was a prick, and there's no way I was ever going to deal with him or his company again. So,
and I think that's usually what you'll. Yes, I agree that there is a certain amount of disgruntlement. Somebody that leaves an organisation, that if they're happy there, they're not going to say anything. But if they're unhappy, they won't. But actually, I find on Glassdoor, there are some organisations that have got really glowing reviews from ex-employees. So actually, I don't think that bears out. I think nowadays people are more willing to give feedback about
I think
employees.
it's the thing that got me with this particular company was that it was the same comments from the employees, and that's
Yeah,
what you
and
need
then
to
you
look
go, there's
for.
a systemic problem.
If there's a pattern, then it's definitely something you should watch out for. I think I've been offered 4 jobs over the last few months, and I've turned every single one of them down, just because I don't want to work for dickheads, really. And I
Yeah.
think, maybe that's an age thing. I can't be doing with that anymore, Musa, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely, buddy. No, I agree. Let's get back to the CV. I mean, my CV's got 3 sections for skills. You don't need it if you're coming from a technical perspective. You just basically need 2 sections, and that will be your technical skills and then your soft skills. So interpersonal skills, communication. And again, some people, they don't bother with that. What they do is they have their hardcore cybersecurity skills and then they have their other IT skills. So it could be that you want to put, Splunk, all the various bits of, if you're a pen tester, web app testing, the tools that you use that you've used, if you're a network infrastructure engineer, you put the different bits of kit that you've maybe worked with or got experience of skills with. Again, you make it relative. If you think someone if the role is looking for soft skills as well, I would definitely put a section in there that's got soft skills on there. If it's abundantly clear all you're going to be doing all day, you've got no customer facing aspect in it, you might not need so many. You can probably mention that instead of having a section on soft skills, you can probably just mention highly motivated, self-motivated, good community, whatever it is. So they get the idea in the first section. You might not need that section on soft skills. What I'm saying is you tailor it again. You see whether the job spec requires a person to do to utilize those skills or not. With your work history, again, use bullet points and keep it brief. You don't need more than, I'd say, 7 or 10. If it's related to what you're doing, 10 points, 10 bullet points max. You don't need more than that. And to be honest, if it's all going to be repetitive and all the previous experiences are the same, all they're going to be reading is a different company with this literally the same, network engineer, visited client site, connected up routers, hubs. What are they going to learn from that? They're going to just know. Like I said, it's not the key bit of information. All it will show is that where you've worked, how long you worked there, the role that you did, and if you've had progression within the role. That's probably more important. What you're going to do is you're going to have what do you call it? Those key bits of work that you've done. So, for example, if you've been doing web app testing, maybe you want to mention some of the projects that you worked on, or some of the client that you haven't mentioned within your accomplishments. It might be on a daily basis. You're sort of detecting threats all the time. You're doing vulnerability assessments, or you're having to write the report. Maybe it's not an automated report writing system, so you've got to write one every time. Pain in the arse, but you got to do it. So maybe you want to mention that in there so that they understand that. Hang on. And from that, they'll know your communication skills are good. Your written communication is good. Because I remember speaking to a client of mine. I placed a pen tester with with him, and what he said is that we don't use what do you call it? We don't use automated. The automated report writing. We have a system whereby we literally we manually write it out. We've got templates, but essentially we do it. So it was important that the person had good communication skills, because it's not just a case of the automated system will generate a report. They had to write them themselves. So that it became key. So when I was sending candidates through for the role, I was making sure that it was apparently clear, abundantly clear, that this person's got good communication. That's why I say it's very important to understand what you're applying for and why, because you can then play around with how you're presenting the information. So you put the bullet points in and make sure that, as a maximum of about 10. 1 point on the software, on the online portal, what's it called? myperfectcv.co.uk. It actually helps you write out the bullet points. So one of the advantages of some of this AI technology is that it can actually help you build the CV. It's not just about literally you doing it all yourself and paying a fee and thinking, you know what, why am I paying £5 for this or whatever it is? It actually does help you because if you put in your job role so there's a box you can put the job role into, it can actually then give you a whole list of phrases you can use. So you don't even have to do your own thinking. It will actually, because again, the software has worked out what the AI looks for. So that's why I recommend that particular site, myperfectcv.co.uk, because it actually helps you, and you can save every different CV as you want. And that's the beauty of it. You can have 10 different CVs saved on there, which apply for every different role if you want.
So Musa, quickly, we've got a question relative to that. Tried to make this CV at My Perfect CV, but it isn't free. Is there any free websites? I mean, I found Resume.io. I think was a few pounds for a week's access,
and that's
what I used, and then cancelled it after I'd made the CV. So, but I searched and searched and searched for about a day, and I couldn't find anything.
There's none. I mean, there are now templates on Microsoft Word, but to be fair, Microsoft Word doesn't have that AI technology built in to help you build a CV. And you're right, there isn't any free ones. I researched this. I spent probably best part of a day looking online. Went through to, I don't know what number page, maybe page 100 or something by the time I'd finished.
Yeah, Darren's just put one up. Flowcv.io. I've got no idea. Let's have a look. I'll have a look at that later. Thanks, Darren. Appreciate it. And I see Meg making comments about my stable background. For anyone else who watched the Cyber Career Day, we were having internet issues at my house, so I went to a friend's and used his office, and I stuck my green screen up with tape at the start, and I think 3 times through the event it fell down, and it was like a comedy moment where it sort of peeled away from the wall. So yeah, thanks Meg for bringing that up. Much appreciated.
He's not really in a data center. Anyone that doesn't know,
I'm not. No,
it's a green screen that allows him to then put up a.
There you go. In the office now.
Yeah, so I think we've covered off the format of this page. So if we go to the next one, Simon, please, my trusted assistant.
Oh, sorry, glamorous was the word, but I'll let you off. There we go.
I put in a section on education for myself because I did a PhD, and although it's not really relevant, it just shows research skills. It could be you've got different an education, and remember, education and certification is different. They're not the same. So if your education is a bachelor's degree in computer science or it's related to what you're doing, that needs to go further up the page, because if you're an entry-level candidate or if you've not got much experience, for an employer to see that might give them a little bit of a boost and give you an edge over somebody else. However, if you've got bags of experience, it's irrelevant. Really is irrelevant. There's not really much to say on here. I've done it the wrong way round on it. It's actually an error. It should have been the PhD should have been at the top. Again, it should be chronological with the latest one first. But again, what I would say is that what's more important in this day and age is certification, and that needs to be straight after your accomplishments. They need to see that on the front screen. Boom.
Let's go back to that page. What was it? A couple of pages before, wasn't it?
Yeah, it needs to be here.
This one. Yeah. There's a quick comment up here as well. Let me just. Oh, hold on. Let me do this properly. There we go. Companies and Amazons have CV screening. What kind of screen? I'm interested in the answer to this as well.
So it's all current systems use a form of AI. So how do I explain this? So basically, you've got what's called an ATS system, an applicant tracking system, and what happens is the first form of screening actually happens there. So usually there's some screener questions that you're asked when you're making the application. If it's on one of the job boards, if it's directly, what it might do is it might, from your CV, related to the job spec, it might pick out certain terminology in there, certain keywords, see how many times it's mentioned. So there is a form of AI screening that goes on. So it's a developed method of non-human, let's say, screening that goes on. So the first layer is non-human screening. Okay, and what happens is that will first of all weed out the really irrelevant applications according to
And this is why it's so important to tailor each one to each job, because at this point you've got to make sure those buzzwords or those keywords out of the job advert are in there. Is that right, Musa?
absolutely,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
If you, I mean, it's similar to. Do you remember? Oh, most people know a little bit about SEO. So what used to happen is that organically what people used to do is they used to use, if the page is with black writing, in white writing all across the page or all around the page in other parts of their web page, they would write certain keywords so it'd bump it up. It'd be invisible, you couldn't see it, but it was written there, and it would then bump them up because it would be recognized by Google technology to know that this website's got 500 references of this, therefore it should be in the top one, two,
See,
whatever.
this is good. People are really engaging now, and whole cyber or Paul's just responded back to Alazar 50-50. What was that one? That was, does the format of the CV matter from place to place, UK, Europe, or US? I mean, for me, who's sent applications off to UK and US, I've had as much success with both. So I've used this exact template for mine over the last, well, the 3 days that I was applying, and it kind of hit the mark for the US and the UK. I think, again, we mentioned it earlier, and Paul from Whole Cyber Human Initiative mentioned it earlier about the resumes being a kind of a more detailed version of a CV. And I think effectively what I've had to do on my second interview is put together a proposal with a little bit more information about the skills I've got on what I'm going to do. So I would probably suggest that that is kind of a part of a resume of the second process. The other thing is, does the AI also look at the format Tess has asked? That's a good question.
That I'm not sure. That I'd have to research into that to find out.
I'll do some googling, Tess, and I'll stick an answer up in the chat here on YouTube when we've finished.
I will have a look into that. I mean, I would have not have thought that the format makes much difference because it's not there to recognize the format. It's there to recognize keywords
Content, yeah.
and essentially run searches on keywords within the CV.
So it's more the eye catching side of it. Then Musa is more for when it gets to the next stage, when it gets in front of a real person. Yeah.
Absolutely. When it gets to an actual recruiter, employer, or hiring manager, you want to know that it's easy for them to read. It's got all the key information right boom in front of them on page one, and that it's very easily readable. So the format does matter. At the end of the day, think of it like this: that you could have the best skills in the world, but if you turn up in a t-shirt that says "sex sells" to an interview,
Depends what the job is.
yeah, depends what the job is. But generally speaking, what happens is they just want to know that you're a professional individual and that you are able to present yourself in a professional way. And the CV is the same. That's your first port of call. I mean, at the end of the day, if a CV isn't well laid out and is not substance and style, you're going to find that no matter what substance you've got, if the style can't get the information across in an easy way, you're stuffing yourself. Therefore, it does matter. As much as I'd like to sit here and say, you know what, it doesn't really matter. No, just it does.
Do you know, I had this conversation with someone last week, and it was an ironic one because I turned up at our meeting before I had an interview myself, and I turned up in like scruffy jeans, trainers, this hoodie, I think actually, and a hat. And after we were sat there for an hour and a half, I said, "Do you mind just watching my bag while I get changed?" And it was like a stars in their eyes moment, if you can remember that program, Musa, where I went off to the toilets, then came back in a suit, and the guy sort of went like this. I mean, for me, I'm shiny shoes, shiny mind, so I feel more confident in a suit if I'm in that position. Also, I know no matter what the world says and no matter what we all think, I don't care what people wear, but we make subconscious decisions without knowing it. And first impressions mean an awful lot. And if someone turns up to an interview in this faded, skanky hat, I'd be probably quite annoyed and a bit offended. But then I am nearly 50.
let me tell you 100%. You're absolutely right. Do you know, I had a situation where about a year ago, no, not a year ago, not as long as that. When did we come out of? I think it was about 6 months ago. People were still managing to do face to face. No, it was at the beginning of the year. It was at the beginning of the year, and they were able to do face to face interviews. Essentially, what happened was I had a candidate. Usually I prepare people 100%, and I tell them, this is step by step what you need to do to prepare for an interview. And I said to him, that he didn't really want me to prepare him fully. He wanted me off the call as quick as possible. He knew it all. Turned up didn't wear anything, that resembled professional. And
It
he went.
doesn't have to be like a shirt and tie. It could just be like a tidy polo shirt and ironed
Absolutely,
jeans. That's all I think. I think it's more about the clean and presentable rather than wearing something
absolutely.
smart.
Absolutely, but in certain clients and in certain roles, for example, if you're going for a consultant role, as
Yeah,
you need to wear a suit
yeah,
because they're going to expect you to do that. And if you're going to go and see a client, it's going to be expected that you do. So, he didn't want to hear, so he didn't do any of that. Within 15 seconds, a hiring manager had decided, because he turned up literally wearing scruffs to an interview. The hiring manager decided this guy's a prick. And he messaged me in the beginning of what this guy's come, looking like a prick. Did you not tell him?
You see, that then reflects badly on you as well, doesn't it? But again, it's back to that leading a horse to water, isn't it? That we mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. If at the end of the day, this is just to get you to an interview. So you've got to remember the CV, the point of the CV, and always focus your mind on that. Why am I writing this CV? It's to get you to an interview. Once you've got the interview, that's where you're going to really sell yourself. So
I think Paul's point in there about t-shirt and a blazer works well. I actually wore a suit with a roll neck. Thought I was James Bond a bit last week. So, I went, well, do you know what? Funny story. My wife and I've got no suits that fit me because for 2 years I haven't worn one, and I've put on a little bit of timber. So we had a mad dash to the local, what we call charity shops or thrift shops, as you call in the States, because obviously we're on a bit of a budget at the moment. Desperately tried to find something, couldn't find anything, so I had to run into town and go to H&M is where no, I didn't. I went to, can't remember the name of the shop. Anyway, irrelevant. Ended up spending, I don't know how much on a suit that I've worn once now and probably won't wear again for a little while, but didn't want to wear a shirt. And one of the mannequins had a roll neck on. So I thought I'll go for that. And I looked a bit like a smarmy dick, but we'll see what they say.
But we'll do that another day. We'll go into we'll do another one on how to prepare for an interview.
Yeah,
So
thanks, Kerry. I wish I was James Bond. I think that's the problem, which is why I wanted to be a red teamer in the first place, I think. Sorry,
definitely.
Musa, I'll shut up now. So I realised that we've gone like 15 minutes over, having so much fun for a start. Look.
Yep. If we go to just go through the slides and I'll tell you. Here we go. So next one. Right. So essentially, here the checklist. Let's just run through the checklist again because that's essentially it. That's the CV. You want to make sure that you're using an easy font to read. You want to make sure that each CV or the CV that you have is tailored to every role, and that doesn't just mean the job spec, but also the company. If you can spot certain things within a company and you think, you know what, somehow I can weave that into my CV, do it because they'll love that. I'll tell you something now. As an employer, the employer will think, wow, this person's really done a bit of homework on us here. They will like that. Also, use bullet points because it's much easier to read something which has got bullet points on it. It's clean, it's fresh. It doesn't require reams of grammatically correct sentences either. So it takes that out of the equation. If you're not very good at structuring sentences, or you're worried that your written English is mine's not particularly good. I can present myself really well spoken wise, but written, I end up having to get lots of help from Word.
Grammarly.
Yeah, Grammarly,
Apart
exactly.
from it records absolutely everything you put on there. So from a security point of view, it's a bit crap.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to have all your personal details, and let me just run through. You just need to have the city you live in and the country. You don't need your date of birth in there. Anything that's going to put a bias on you, don't have it. don't bother putting it on there. You can't get away with putting your name on there because you need that on there. And if you've got a PhD, put doctor, because people like that. They think, oh yeah, there's a bit of a doctor coming. So that's good. You want to make sure that you've got your telephone number and email address or contact information. Okay. You need to have your links to, if you're a coder, then GitHub. If you're a hacker, the appropriate sites where you've got some recognition. You also, if you've got a personal website and you want them to be able to go and see what your ability on that, give that as well. Your LinkedIn is really important. People now, they will find you on LinkedIn. So if you've got social media, it's not, you know what, I try and tell employees it doesn't really matter. But sometimes, you know what, they've caught out some really bad red flags. We found some people really, really racist. And I had my
through LinkedIn or just through the internet
no,
search?
thankfully not through LinkedIn, but through other social media like Twitter and Facebook, whereby they said, Musa, something doesn't sit right with me. I just felt uncomfortable in the interview. Can you just go and do a bit of research on their social media? So, naturally, what's your Twitter? What's your and I think you kind of realize then that there's something wrong because they're not really that willing to give it to you. And then and some of them very cleverly try and make it private. Because I suppose there is ways of. I don't really use much, so I hate Facebook, so I never use it. And Twitter, I used to use it until I found I was wasted too much time arguing with racists all day. So I switched it off, or misogynists. So I just switched it off and don't bother with it. But yeah, there is ways of making a profile private. And if if you're putting your life story on there and rude pictures and also switch it off or make it private so someone can't see it. Because I'll tell you now, employers do go and do thorough deep dives on for certain roles. They don't want any surprises afterwards.
Well, I think also anyone who's representing a company, it's not just the employer who can do that. If you go and work for a business and then, something comes out, it's not going to look good on them either. I mean, that's one reason why I'm glad that the only time I ever went on social media other than LinkedIn, I've been on here a year. Actually, yesterday, LinkedIn was my kind of first anniversary of using it properly. But other than that, the only time I've been on social media is when I married a younger wife, my wife now. And like middle-aged men do sometimes, they're quite proud of the fact that, and I put pictures on Facebook for like a week. Since then, I've never been on. I think we did a parachute jump, and I put some pictures on Instagram of that. But other than that, I've stayed off it, and I'm really glad I have. And my 22-year-old will tell you how glad he is that he's sort of not posted too much stuff on us either, because he does modelling work. Which obviously, if you're doing modelling work and representing a company and wearing their clothes, then the last thing they want is to see obnoxious pictures and comments all over the internet. Not that my son would do that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I know, and I totally agree. So be careful what you post. And if you are somebody who likes a bit of a drink or he likes to smoke weed or whatever it is, I would avoid putting any pictures or references to that on there because I'll tell you what, there's nothing that will. And you could find that the employer isn't that keen on somebody having that kind of an image, and you just have to. It might preclude you from a job, so be careful. So, in terms of your personal statement, try and keep it down. But I've written there 4 to 5 lines. They're not necessary. Maybe you can go more if you're very experienced and you bring a lot to the table. If it goes to a full paragraph, don't worry about it. 10 lines. It's not really that. It's their first impression of you will be that principal statement that you put on there. So if it has to be a bit longer, no problem. Skills with proficiency. This is something very common within cybersecurity and the tech industry in general. People like to quantify this, maybe because they come from a sciencey background or a mathematical background. They like to quantify things, and there's no harm in that. I do that myself. In fact, if we get a chance now at the end of this, I'm going to try and dig out a CV and just show you how I quantify people's experience. So showing your proficiency level is a good thing. Your achievements, don't do more than 10. Don't have, and again with your skills as well. If don't have more than 10 technical skills in there, you don't need to. You can put certain skills on the same line and have 10 different bullet points. Same thing for your achievements, 10 different achievements. Your work experience, starting with your most recent experience first and chronologically working down. And if you've got very little experience, if you were running a society at university, if you've done voluntary work, if you've done sort of freelance work, put it in there. You don't realize somebody might find some resonance with it. It could be that the person interviewing you, they might have done the same thing. Maybe they 10 years earlier were in the same position as you, and they did some voluntary.
And then you've instantly got that rapport, haven't you?
Bang on. Bang.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The education, you need to break this into two different separate sections. One is your certifications, and this is, again, a huge topic in cybersecurity particularly. Have a separate section. If you've got lots of qualifications or certifications, I should say, in cybersecurity specifically, have a section under your accomplishments for that. And if your education is that you've got a degree in history, or you've got, even if it's a computer science degree, you put it in there, but you don't need to really make a big issue of it unless the job spec says degrees are an absolute must.
Which a lot of them do, Musa. Don't they?
Lord knows why.
Well, that's me out.
Well, I don't think it matters, and certainly in certain professions it really doesn't. I know some brilliant salespeople that they were working markets at the age of 16, working the market.
Same. It's the degree of life, Musa. The degree of life.
Absolutely. Just because I've got a degree or a PhD doesn't make me any better than somebody
It makes you a bit smarter than me, though. I'll give you that.
Academically speaking, but nothing else.
Yeah.
I don't think in any way, shape, or form does it have any other difference. So yeah,
I think as well, the only other thing I'd say about that, and I'm not one to stick up for degrees, but it does show that you can stick at something, doesn't it? Again, it's that point.
I'd agree it does, but to be honest, I tell my son now, really, I mean, he wants to do a mathematical, financial mathematics, which is basically the old actuary course. I say that what you're doing is fine, but if you were telling me you're going to do mass communication, I'd tell you shut up and sod off. I'm not paying 10 grand a year for you to do a piss pot course.
Well, I agree. Too many wasted degrees is what there is in the UK anyway, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll go into that another day. But essentially, with your degree or your certification, you can separate them out depending on what you've actually done. Now, here is a bit of a change in thinking. Some people want to put their hobbies at the bottom. This can be a good thing and a bad thing. Now, it depends what your hobbies are, and depends, because there is a school of thought that says it creates bias. So, for example, it might create a positive bias and also a negative bias. So I don't know if you enjoy something that's a little bit out there and not really, I don't know, if you're a swinger or something.
I knew you were going to say, why don't I have the word dogging in my head, Musa?
So if you've got something in there that perhaps isn't really appropriate to put on a professional piece of paper, then don't write it on there. Yeah, sure. If you like golf, sports, you know what? I'm not.
I thought you had to put walking, swimming, reading, and socialising. Don't you have to put that on there? No?
I don't think so. And I think more and more employers are getting wise to the fact that it probably doesn't make any difference. However, before you go into an interview, research the person that's interviewing you, because if you can see that there's something that they do that you do, you can bring that up and immediately get a little bit of a rapport going. I wouldn't necessarily put your hobbies on the CV. It's because there's a more recent school of thought. It says that it might either give you a bias towards you or against you, and you really don't know.
But it could be something silly, couldn't it? Like they might like football or soccer, but the other people might like rugby, and it could be something as simple as that the person doesn't actually notice. But
and also sometimes people go into I'm a Man United fan, and they put it on there, and the person there might be a diehard Newcastle fan, and they really hate each other, and literally it's happened. People have not got interviews simply because.
You from Manchester, Musa?
I'm from Manchester, yeah.
I think Manchester had any Manchester United fans.
Well,
I thought they're all the real ones for City fans, no?
No. We're the real.
See, this is the point, isn't it?
Exactly.
I can't mention my football team. I support Chelsea, so we're in a bit of the doghouse at the moment because of our previous owner. So let's not mention that.
No, but I think it's very, very debatable as to whether you put your hobbies on there. I think every individual needs to sort of work out themselves. Is it Will it add?
I mean, it could be relevant, couldn't it? Some people I know who were watching this earlier, their hobbies are building labs.
That's fine, and that can actually go inside your accomplishments as well. So you might not need it. You can bring it in a certain way. So put it in there. Don't put it in there. You have to play it by ear. You also, whatever you put inside your accomplishments, don't repeat it in your work experience. You've got it there. It's on the front page. They're going to see it straight away. Don't bore them by repeating. And also, then when you're explaining about your roles, use bullet points. Keep it very succinct, and basically let them know what you did, what technology you work with, what was it that you did. Some people, unfortunately, they write War and Peace about what the company did. Don't bother. Write about what you did, because the only thing an employer is interested in is what your experience has been, and that's a common mistake. I mean, I mentioned there myperfectcv.co.uk. There's loads of them. I think someone mentioned flowcv.io. There's loads of them out there. The reason why I like My Perfect CV, you can dip in and out as you want. It is about £5. It's not expensive, and you can cancel it so you don't have it. You got it for 14 days. That should be enough time to get a basic CV or 3 or 4 CVs together, and then you can just edit them in Word as you
You can
need
save
to.
them as PDFs and Word anyway, can't you, and change them later?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The only advantage of My Perfect CV is that it has AI technology in there that can help you write things. So that's the one advantage. I don't know about other ones, and that's why I use this one.
Resume. I mean, let's just make it clear. Neither of us are on commission from any of these people.
No.
The only one I know of, and that's because I used it last week, is resume.io. I think it's a similar cost, and it has got the AI in that helps you with kind of filling some bits. But I think much the much perhaps.
Any of them are good. And if any of you need, once you've put together your CV, if you just want me to put an eye over it, send it across. I'll have a look happily, no problem. If we can go to the next screen, please, my very, very good assistant.
Thank you.
So now, are there any questions that people have? Please make a note of my contact information so that you can contact me directly if you want help with your CVs. But are there any questions now that we've not covered off that I can run through now?
There's a couple. There's one actually, because I've tried to cover them off as we've gone, and I've saved this for the end because it's really relevant to the people that I speak to in the community. So before I bring the question up, I mentioned in my post earlier, frame it and give it some perspective. And I've been blown away. Having a global community has blown me away the amount of talent there is out there, and it's also blown me away the amount of talent that isn't UK based or US based. And some of these guys and girls are having real problems getting jobs, which I understand from a security clearance point of view. But one person in particular, who I'm going to bring his question up in a moment, it was a Syrian refugee, been through absolute hell and trauma. Mohammed has, and his story is absolutely inspiring. He's beating the system at the moment by doing freelancer work. But the question is, do you think companies accept remote cyber specialists, especially, I mean, in his case, being a Syrian refugee, or with the security concerns for a guy in a total different country and a refugee? I mean, you've got two kind of questions there. The kind of location I've come across with a lot of companies is an issue. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Security clearance is one. The other are legal reasons. So I don't know, Musa, your thoughts, and how do we get around that? Because we're missing out on a whole wealth of talent out there.
They are, and it's very sad actually that there is talent all across the world that they could utilize. Companies in the UK or wherever they are could utilize, but unfortunately, the narrow-mindedness prevails.
And is that the problem? Is it the narrow-mindedness rather than regulation then?
Well, there's two things. One, yes, security clearance would be a problem because they'd need, in certain instances, you do need a certain level of security clearance. If you're working for the government, if you're working for a defense company, if you're working for somebody that's got external clients, you want to be able to check this person is trustworthy. And so to some extent, I do understand where they're coming from. However, at the same time, I think they put a lot of obstacles in their own, these companies are putting obstacles for themselves.
They are.
At the end of the day, surely they're using your systems and you can monitor what they are doing on your system. Because like for myself, we sit behind a Citrix firewall. that you can, sorry, behind a Citrix remote, what's it called, the virtual desktop.
Yeah.
So you can actually put things in to monitor what that person's doing, and you can stop them accessing anything outside of that if you
So,
want.
the answer is then is finding the right companies who are prepared to do that, and perhaps that's an education piece from the industry's point of view, and something that we should start doing more about as a community, talking about that, because freelancing isn't for everyone, and it seems some of the most talented people I've met aren't in the UK or the US, and they are from companies. I mean, you've got Zablon from Ethiopia, you've got Mohammed, who I think's in Turkey at the moment, and it's a real shame that these people aren't getting those opportunities. I'm conscious that we've gone like half an hour over because it's been so much fun. We've had loads of interactive questions all the way through. Musa, I'd love to run another one of these perhaps next week on the interview part of the process, or what happens next. If we could
Yes,
do that, that would be
absolutely.
absolutely amazing. I mean, we've had loads and loads of people involved and dropping in the chat, so thanks to everyone for doing that. Musa, have you got anything you want to add before we wrap up and I go and get my dinner?
No, I think that's it. I think basically, if anybody wants to, my contact details are there. Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect to anybody. And if you've got specific queries, put them in an email or add me on LinkedIn, and you can send me the queries there, and I can deal with it on an individual basis. More than happy to work with anyone with a CV. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Oh, I suppose before we go, got any jobs, Musa? I should know, shouldn't I? Are there any jobs that you're
I,
looking for
there,
filling at the
there is.
moment?
I did put one out. It's not directly through myself. It's through an organisation called the Specialist Hub in
Yeah,
Manchester. They are very. If anyone's looking for entry level positions in the UK, check out their website. I will post on my LinkedIn. I'll post a link to them. They've
brilliant.
got lots of entry level, apprentice level positions that are available. So yeah, it's well worth having a look at them. I can't off the top of my head at the moment. All the positions I've got are non-cyber. They are technical roles, but they're not non-cyber related ones. So
Brilliant.
unfortunately, I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay, well, it's worth an ask, wasn't it? So my final bits will be, if you're not a member already, if I'm
Join.
pointing in the right direction, where is it here? There we go. If you're not a member already, come and join our free community. It is free. We're approaching 3,000 members in 9 months, and it's all about trying to help each other. Nothing to sell, just the kind of community spirit, and we're building something special. Please do come along and say hello. My next live stream, or our next live stream, should I say, is tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 p.m. It's meant to be British summertime, but looking out of my window, we've got drizzle and cold
No
here, so
good.
we won't go
Sweating.
into that. But tomorrow we're talking about AppSec. We've got Jessica Boyer on, who is working in the information security industry for the last 20 years. I've had her on the show before, and I'm going to do a series on AppSec and the problems there is around it. It seems to be an area that isn't talked about enough online. However, from all the jobs I've been looking at recently, it's one of the biggest areas for recruitment and for consultancy freelancer work as well. I don't know if you found that, Musa. So I want to try and focus on that tomorrow. Other than that, you'll be pleased to know I'm now going to stop running on. I haven't got an outro video for you today because I didn't have time to make one. So I'm going to press end stream. Thank Musa very much.